Hi, I'm Rick Partlow. Welcome to How to Write Science Fiction That Doesn't Suck. It's been a while since I've recorded a video, for one reason because I've been very busy. Ever since we moved here to Wyoming, I have had lots of stuff to do, lots of distractions, lots of work. I have deadlines I got to meet, so it's not necessarily that I can't fit in the time to record the video, but I can't fit in the time to think up a good subject for a new video, which is the hard part because I've gone over a lot of the things that I wanted to when I started this channel. Today I want to talk about something that's a little bit outlaw, a little bit renegade. So I'm going to put on my Wyoming cowboy hat and talk about politics in your science fiction. Now, there has been a lot of famous science fiction novels that deal with politics. Some deal with it well, and those are timeless. Some deal with it poorly, and nobody remembers them. The timeless ones, Starship Troopers, Forever War, dealt with politics. Forever War was a indictment of Vietnam. Starship Troopers was an exploration of a political system where only veterans could vote. A lot of people want to call Heinlein fascist for suggesting the system, but just because he suggested it didn't mean he was prescribing it. I mean, Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle wrote science fiction with monarchy set in the far future, and people were like, you don't really want a monarchy, do you? Like, well, they're writing a story. You have to have some government. The idea that people will experiment with monarchy in the future is not that crazy, and just because that's the government doesn't mean you're recommending it. See, that's the thing about science fiction. You can explore the effects of methods of government, methods of economics, without saying this is how we should do it. People today don't seem to grasp the fact that you can describe a system of government or a society that you don't really want to live in without making it absolutely hellish and nightmarish. But that's nuance, and nuanced thinking has gone out of style, so I don't mean to sound bitter. But I want to talk about the right way to put politics in your science fiction. Now, I have this is all brought on by a couple of different things. One, I keep getting reviews where people assume they know my politics because of the societies or the characters I write in my science fiction. I have been accused of being a right-wing shill. I have been accused of being a progressive shill. And for the stupidest reasons. In one series, the Chinese Communist Party and the Russians are like the bad guys. And that somehow makes me right-wing, when last time I checked, although I'm dating this video for people watching in the future, Russia just invaded the Ukraine and nobody thinks they're the good guys. China has been, killing and enslaving ethnic minorities in their country, and most people don't think they're the good guys. So I don't know, and that's on both sides of the political spectrum. People think that. So I don't know how anybody could assume that I am a right-winger because of the fact that I don't like the current Russian and Chinese governments. I've also been accused of being a left-winger because I have had strong female characters in my books. And, I've taken great care, because I hate the cliche that's in a lot of modern movies where a 90-pound woman beats up a 230-pound man and they both have fighting experience. That's not happening. Physics are a thing. So I've been taking great care that my strong female characters, they're pilots, which doesn't require them to beat up 230-pound men, or they have been biologically enhanced, through science to make them able to beat up somebody bigger than them because they have, like, bionic joints or, artificial muscle fiber, things like that. But the fact that they're strong women characters means that I'm a progressive. It couldn't mean the fact that I have 6 sisters and I have a daughter and who's very independent and strong-willed and has played sports her whole life and doesn't take crap from anybody. Maybe it's because I know strong females and I put them in my fiction. But people assume, oh, he has an agenda because he has strong female characters. It's not like I'm fetishizing strong female characters like some authors who I will not name. I am making what I hope are realistic female characters in roles that require strength of will and persistence and sometimes stubbornness. I have a character in my Sunkiller books who is an archaeologist who was raised in cartel-era Mexico and had to deal with lots of crap, and lots of violence. So she's very strong-willed, she's very stubborn, and sometimes this is a weakness, but, it's just who she is. And somebody suggested that the fact that she was competent and knew how to defend herself because of where she'd been raised, that this was somehow a political thing. And that started me thinking, these reviews started me thinking, well, what politics have I put in my work? If I put politics that I wasn't aware of. Sometimes that happens too. And the fact is, and this is the first bullet point for this talk, is that we all put politics in our fiction. We can't help it because we see the world through a philosophical, political lens, and we turn people into good guys or bad guys based on how closely they adhere to our politics or our philosophy. And it's okay that you do that as long as you know you're doing it. Don't pretend that you aren't. But when you're writing something that takes place 100 years from now or 200 years from now, you have to be careful not to try to impose current day politics into a totally different situation. And that's bullet point number 2. I read several books that were written 10 years ago-ish, and they all tried to deal with the Iraq War, which, how to get into a war, why to get into a war, how to fight a war, those are legitimate subjects for military science fiction, obviously, but they didn't try to make it a general, universal examination of why to get into a war or how to fight one. They was very specific, and it was very blatant that this is dealing with the Iraq War. I want to say more. It was much more blatant than the Forever War was dealing with Vietnam. But you could read that and never think of Vietnam. If you weren't familiar with the Vietnam War, you would never know. These books, you would know. It's clear. It's blatant. I'm not going to name them, but it took me out of the story. It was like I'm reading a future science fiction, military science fiction story, getting embedded into the world, and then this plops you right out of the story because it's talking about Iraq, and it is, and you can tell. It's blatant. And this is bullet point number 3. The politics in your story should be native to the society in your story. Do not try to impose modern day issues into a future society. You should give them their own political issues, and if you want to make a political point, it should be a universal one. If you want to make a political point about race, then you should make one about prejudice. And this is a dumb example because it was a stupid episode, but it was well thought out in how they did it. The Star Trek episode where the people were black on one side and white on the other, and the ones who were black on the left side hated the ones who were black on the right side. Now that's kind of ham-handed way to do it, but it's what I'm talking about as far as you don't come out and say, oh, it's 200 or 300 years in the future, and yet black people are still prejudiced against, and in the same way they were in the 1960s, which is when Star Trek was made. You don't go out and say that, because it turns your show into something else. It turns it into a Twilight Zone episode instead of a science fiction show. You need to show that prejudice is wrong by using examples in your universe. Don't bludgeon people over the head with how obvious it is and how blatant the example is. Be subtle. Audiences in general don't want to be bludgeoned over the head. You're gonna please the people who agree with you, but not everybody's going to agree with you. That's why, there's some authors who very much insert their personal politics in their books in a blatant way, and some of them are successful because they have cultivated an audience that agrees with them. And if you have the ability to cultivate that large of an audience that agrees with you, then maybe it can work for you. But it's only going to work for a while. Your books are only going to be successful in as long as those topics, those issues, are still hot button issues. At some point, 20 years down the road, nobody's going to be reading yours, and if they read it, they're going to be like, what is he talking about? This is dated. If they know at all the issues, they're going to be saying, this is incredibly dated. You read some science fiction books or watch some movies that are universal, that have appeal, that it's timeless. And then you watch some and you're like, oh my God, this was definitely a product of its day. You don't want to be writing a book that was a product of its day. Unless, if you're only in it for the money, that can work. If you get it out quick, that can work. But do you really want to invest months or sometimes years of your life in something that is going to be outdated in a year, in 10 years? This is what you're leaving behind. When you die, these books will still be here. Do you want them to be timeless? Do you want people 20, 30, 40 years from now to read these and say, oh, that's a great story? Then don't try to make it a story that only applies in the next 5. So that will be point number 4, I think it is. Make your political arguments or illustrations or analogies timeless. Make them things that are going to apply to people in 20 or 30 years, because it's a human issue. It's not an issue of our current society or this current administration. If you make a thinly veiled Trump administration or Biden administration the bad guy in your story, people are going to see that, and you're going to piss off half your audience, whichever way you go. And that's just in the next few years. 10 years from now, nobody will know what you're talking about. Your examples, unless they're well written, will make no sense. Will not have the emotional resonance you hope for. So don't try to impose current day politics and current day issues into the politics of your sorry, my dogs are barking at something. I think they're barking at me for not being with them. Okay, so don't try to impose the politics of the current day into your military science fiction or space opera. You need to make your issues universal. All right. And one other thing that is more for readers than writers, but also don't assume that a writer believes something politically because he said it so in a book. These are not specific issues of the day, because if somebody puts a slam of a certain administration in a book, well, yeah, then they do believe that they put that in there on purpose. But if somebody puts a certain type of government in a book and they're not the bad guy, don't just believe that they prefer that kind of government. I wrote Seeds of Gaia, perfect example of this. I've got three different kinds of government in that book, and the good guys come from this certain kind of government, and the people who are seen as their antagonists in the beginning come from a different kind of government. One's conservative, one might be labeled liberal, the other one is kind of communist, the third one. But as the book goes on, you find out, no, they're not really communist because of this. It's something you didn't expect. And this other government you think is the good guys, well, maybe they're not so good. And the government you think is the bad guy, maybe they're not so bad. And none of them are universally bad or good. They've adapted to certain circumstances, and by the end of the book, hopefully you find out that they all have to learn from each other. And you could, and people have, read like the first few chapters and assume that I believe one of these governments is good and the other is bad, and that's my personal political beliefs. That's the lack of nuance that we face in our current political age. But you have to remember that you're not writing just for the next 5 years. So do not be afraid to put politics in a book that you don't agree with. Don't be afraid to make subtle points. Maybe right now some reviewer will get pissed off, but in 5 or 10 years people will appreciate that you did something that's universal. Okay. I've pretty much covered all I want to do about politics. I'll just go over it real quick. If you're going to put politics in a book, make the politics part of the story you're telling, part of the universe you're telling. Make them native to that universe. Don't try to make overt political points about current issues by putting a thinly veiled version of Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi or Vladimir Putin, for that matter, in your book. You need to make sure that the good guys and the bad guys are good and bad because of what they've done in your universe, not who they represent in ours. Because the people reading your book may not be living in this current time. You're writing something that will hopefully last a long time. Make it universal. And I suppose that's it. This is going to be a short one. For anybody who's interested, Wyoming is great. We've had a really mild winter. I think it's like 55 degrees outside right now. It's really warm. Yeah, 54. Had very little snow here where I live, up in north central Wyoming. And hopefully we will not have a spring that like pounces on us with a whole bunch of snow. But no, it's been great. I love living here, and hopefully I can keep writing, keep producing as like I was in Florida, despite all the distractions of the beautiful scenery and the mountains just outside our window. So I will try to get more videos done. Let me tell you, it's difficult to come up with any more craft ideas. If you have a craft question you want me to address or a video you think I should make, feel free to email me, dutyhonorplanet487@gmail.com. Let me know what you think I should make videos on. If you like this series and you feel there's something I haven't touched on, please let me know, because I am running short of ideas that appeal to me that I can talk about for 20 minutes or so. So if you have any that you think I should deal with, you go ahead and let me know. I will do my best to get a video made on them. And if you want to share any thoughts with me, feel free, email or leave a comment on the YouTube videos, and I will try to get something out sooner. And it was nice talking to you all. Have a good rest of your winter.